Sizes 2 to 14, all at savings of 10 to 50% now. Remember, before going back to school, go back to Stephanie's.
It's new, and at your BC Zenith dealer right now. The Smart Choice Zenith 20-inch System 3 Model 1927. Slim, compact, high-performing, with Zenith's exclusive computer space command remote control. Zenith portables, with models priced from just $444 or less at an authorized BC Zenith dealer near you now. Available now at Apollo Electronics, 2547 Montview Street, behind the Fraser Valley Inn, Abbotsford.
Good morning. Second day back. A plethora of politicians, chosen specifically because each one of them has a political problem of some kind or another. And first I want you to meet the giant killer, the man who is totally confident he will ride roughshod over that man Turner in Quadra, Bill Clarke, sitting Tory MP for that riding where they're going to destroy the leader of the Liberal Party, the man who is currently and momentarily Prime Minister of Canada. And Bill, of course, is famous for the fact that he's the man who said, with incredible confidence and some arrogance, I will beat John Turner or any other sucker the Liberals send into Quadra.
I see that, Jack?
I am reliably assured and veritably confident you said that, Mr. Clarke, but please hold your tongue until we get down to you in detail. The other day, of course, I had my contretemps with a fellow by the name of Mulroney. And our news department, ever alert for an angle, decided to campaign or to ask other Tories what they thought Mulroney should have done. So they went to Chuck Cook, who had this gracious remark to say about me.
Not if we're going to win this election, form a Conservative majority government and get this country moving again. That's what Brian Mulroney's job is, not to pander and cater to overstuffed, overbearing, sensitive talk show hosts like my buddy Jack Webster.
Mr. Cook was a talk show host when he had a 2-bit radio program talking to 300 people. I am a reporter and a commentator. Here this morning, of course, is the indefatigable Chuck Cook, who is MP presently for the Conservative Party, the no-speaking party, the sealed-lip party, and he, of course, is in some riding locally around here. I think it's North Vancouver-Burnaby. And then we have a man who was the very epitome of social credit efficiency when he was working for BC Place, but who in dedication to the Liberal Party gave up his job and decided to run a very tough spot to win, Vancouver Centre, held by the indomitable Pat Carney of the Tory party, who certainly cannot be accused of being a sealed lips candidate. And then, of course, we come to the man from the People's Party. He is Ian Waddell, or Waddell, any way you like. And Ian Waddell has recently been accused most unfairly by a Liberal called Nancy Morrison as a man who once took Liberal patronage. Mr. Waddell will respond to these charges on my program this morning. But first, the man who can beat any sucker, including John Turner, the Liberals throw into Quadra. Did you come in your Mercedes-Benz this morning?
No, Jack.
Come
in the big Quadra van.
The big Quadra van. After the break. Brian.
He phoned you again, did he?
Sent me a very nice. He sent me a very nice personal. Jesus. Have you been unfairly maligned by almost every commentator in the country, now that they know you because you're running against Turner, as the dullest MP in the House of Commons? Is that unfair?
Probably, Jack. I call it quiet competence.
Shy.
I wouldn't say so.
I see. What have you done lately that we should know about? I mean, what is your... For instance, how can a good right-wing conservative like you support the nuclear arms freeze?
Well, we've got enough nuclear arms, Jack, and there's a lot of concern about blowing ourselves up. And if we don't solve the nuclear arms race, then there's no point in worrying about
Do
these
you
economic
support
problems, is there?
a unilateral freeze by Canada and nuclear arms? Now, you might get some votes in Quadra if you're short any.
I'm going to work towards the reopening of the umbrella agreement and the cancelling of the cruise missile testing in Canada.
But you think that Iona Campagnola, for instance, is splitting her party's policy when she says, let's freeze now?
Well, I don't think about Iona Campagnola.
Never, ever.
No.
What do you think of John Turner?
Well, I haven't met him in the last few years, so I don't think much about him either.
You don't think much of him or think much about
him.
Why did you say I can beat John Turner or any other sucker or little send in? Was that a misquote by the newspapers?
I don't use the word sucker, so I don't think it's a
So you were
quote.
falsely maligned in that?
Well, I think so.
That's not true.
Unless you've got a tape on it.
No, I'm going to tape on it. What is your attendance record in Parliament? Your opponents say you disappear into the woodwork in Ottawa.
Well, we've got the Liberal whip, at least the Liberal whip. Sorry, Chuck. We've got our whip here, and he knows that my voting record in the first session of the 32nd Parliament was over 90%, one of the highest in the caucus. And right here, Jack, I can show you the excerpt from the Hansard for those parliaments, and my record shows 4 columns of entries in that. Maybe you'd like to have a look at it. It's quite lengthy. So anybody that says that is one of my desperate opponents, is the only way I can describe it to you.
And is Turner a desperate opponent?
Well, he seems to be, because they're resorting to desperate tactics such as they've done in the past.
What kind of desperate tactics?
Well, like letters, Jack, you know. You've seen this letter that somebody fished out of the garbage to give me when I was around at the door yesterday. And that's the kind of tactic, I mean. They did it before. It's nothing new.
Is this not a compliment to you in which they said that a big advantage is what they're saying, in fact, is even if the Liberals get defeated, elect John Turner as leader of a national party, which is much better than having the dull Bill Clarke as the number 99th backbencher in Ottawa.
Well, next Tuesday we'll know about that.
No, but don't you think that's a smart move on their part?
Well, I wouldn't assess it that way.
Yeah, but I mean, it's crafty because
That's
I mean,
what I said.
nobody would miss you if you weren't in Iowa.
Well, I think they would.
Are you in the shadow cabinet?
I'm a deputy critic, yes,
In what field?
in international trade.
International trade. What do you think of Mulroney's Broadbent's proposition to have 60% content on all Japanese cars added in Canada?
Well, I think that would be wonderful if it were achievable, but I'm not at all sure that it is.
Why do you think Mulroney wouldn't come to me and talk to me about the protectionism for Eastern Ontario and Quebec industry? Protectionism which puts up the price of clothing and imports to the West.
Well, I think Mulroney's schedule was otherwise arranged, and I think you've had a fair go at why he didn't come and talk to you.
Do you think it's right, though, that people can campaign? You're winning now in Quadra, aren't you?
Well, the polls show that, but I'm still campaigning, Jack.
But why are you winning? Can you tell me simply why you're winning in Quadra? Because if you can't tell me, I'll tell you. Well,
because we have offered the Canadian people some hope. There are 1.5 million unemployed, and those who are working in Canada are afraid. They're afraid that they may be the next ones to lose their jobs. And we're offering these people hope for new jobs in the private sector, for reduced deficits, and ultimately to eliminate the deficit and start reducing the national debt. The Liberals admit that 1/3 of every dollar the government takes in goes to pay interest on the national debt, and that's an unhealthy situation. It cannot continue, Jack.
And you, as a good Tory, will advocate the slashing of services and bringing down the budgetary deficit.
No, that's not what our policy is at all, Jack.
We
have 5 specific policies that were developed and announced in Prince Albert, which will help the West, and particularly British Columbia, and they include having a Ministry of Forests, and it includes a lot of changes in the fisheries.
If only I could have spoken to someone in authority like Mulroney about it, I would be listening more intently.
Well,
but is it not a fact that you are ahead in the polls, which I presume you will tell me?
We're ahead in the polls, yes.
Your polls?
Yes. Oh, my polls? Yeah. Well, when I go door to door, I get that feeling, yes.
What is your latest poll? In Quadra?
We don't do polls.
You don't do polls?
No. The latest poll was the one that I heard announced this morning.
Right, you're talking about national polls.
No, this was a Quadra poll.
What's the Quadra poll that you had this morning?
The Quadra poll that I heard this morning on the CBC was 53% for the Tories, 23% for the NDP, and 20% for the Liberals in Vancouver-Quadra.
Give me the finishing order of the candidates on election night.
Clarke, Turner, Candelon.
You think that Turner will come into second position?
That's the traditional place for Liberals in Quadra.
I see, even if he is the Prime Minister.
Well, I don't think that's a handicap.
And don't you think that the reason you're getting support is because people, generally speaking, are so sick and tired of the Liberals and they'd vote for you even if they didn't know your name?
Yes, they're sick and tired of the Liberals. They like the Conservative policies. We've got the whole new package there. And by the way, Clarke has served Quadra well for 12 years. And they're well known
Clarke?
there. Yeah.
Who's that?
C'est moi.
Oh, you mean Bill Clarke?
Oui.
How old are you, Bill?
51.
Millionaire?
Well, I haven't checked this morning.
Well-heeled?
I'm not hurting.
And you, of course, are fully in favor of the doctors' extra billing?
We voted unanimously for that in the House of Commons.
Not for extra billing.
Against, no, for the
Against
Medicare, yeah.
Because I don't want to mislead people.
No.
Bill, I know you've kept a very low profile, almost unseen except door to door, but I'm glad that you at least had the courtesy to come and talk to people on the West Coast through dear old Webster.
Jack, I've been talking to you for 12 years. I remember my first interview with you in 1972 in a dingy studio in Water Street.
Dingy Studio was a gorgeous place lined with Salt Spring Island cedar. You said the
Was it?
wrong thing.
Oh.
But thank you very much for coming here this morning. I'm now going to turn just in the search for honesty, truth, justice, and information with some of your colleagues. Bill Clarke, the man who will beat any sucker, including Turner, that gets into Quadra in the race, and of course it is Turner, and I'll be back. Another Tory? Yeah, I suppose so. Cook, Chuck, after the break.
May have overdone it.
Joanne. Chuck Cook is the Tory MP for North Vancouver-Burnaby. Been 5.5 years in the House. Have you been hiding from all candidates' meetings too, Mr. Cook?
Certainly not, Jack.
Have you been at any all candidates' meetings?
Yes, I was at one yesterday on the Barry Clarke Show on CKNW.
Was
We
that
have
your
another one
first
tonight, and we
Was
have
that
another
your
3
first
this
one
week.
yesterday?
Yes, sir, it was.
Why were you under wraps for so long? Are you waiting for the big statement in Toronto this morning on the cost of your promises?
Jack, slow down a minute. It's a summer election, eh? All right,
Hey.
there haven't been any all-candidates meetings. I missed one because I had to talk to a group of old people that I'd been trying to see for a long time. So I missed the one they had on the cruise missile. But we published a letter in the paper explaining our position
kidding.
fully on the cruise missile, and that was that.
I see.
What happened to you? Why such a pussycat interview with the Prime Minister yesterday?
Better a pussycat interview like that than to have to chase Mulroney down the holidays, the hall saying, "Where are you, my charming little friend? Won't you talk to the
Oh,
West
the
Coast?"
mileage you've gotten out of this. You needed something to get your show launched this fall so
And
you could get
Mulroney
on
was-
and rant and rave
Mulroney
for
was
3 days.
stupid enough to give it to me.
Right, he did, and as a
Along
result,
with
you're off to
Norman
a great
Atkins,
start.
the national director of the Tory party, who you must look at askance as I do because these Easterners have no contact with the West Coast, and Mulroney in one fell swoop has demonstrated his disinterest, his lack of interest, and his alienation to the West Coast by saying, "Oh no, we can't talk to any reporters on the West Coast. We're ahead in the polls. For God's sake, don't say anything or you'll put your foot in your mouth." Question for you.
That was quite
And
a
I want a
tirade.
yes or no question.
Inaccurate
Are
tirade.
you in favor of a nuclear freeze now for Canada, yes or no?
Have I stopped beating my wife, yes or no? That's the question
It's
you're
not,
asking.
have you stopped beating
Everybody's
your
in
wife?
favor of a nuclear freeze. It's a question of how to go about it.
Nuclear. Nuclear freeze.
I agree, quite frankly, in this case, with the Prime Minister of Canada, John Turner, with our own leader, and with the two-track system, and with working within NATO and within the Western Alliance. I do
What?
not agree with Mr. Clarke. I certainly don't agree with Ms. Campanola, and I certainly don't agree with those people who want Canada to go it alone, to the embarrassment and perhaps partial destruction of the Western Alliance, which has kept peace in this world for 40 years in Europe.
Chuck Cook, to my question, is he in favor of a nuclear freeze, has finally said, no, he is not.
That's wrong, Jack. I didn't say that, and you know it.
Convoluted nit. You just
Nit.
went round in circles and said you support Turner and you support the official position of the Conservative Party.
Right.
Which means that you will work for a nuclear standstill or a freeze, but Canada should not unilaterally freeze nuclear weapons.
Now that's better. I can accept that.
That's a no.
That is not a no.
Are you in favor of universality of all allowances for Canadians who qualify?
Absolutely, and so is the leader of our party, and so he has stated on many occasions.
Are you in favor of $50 million for rape relief centers as indicated as a possible promise by your leader on the women's debates?
I'd sooner spend $50 million that way than $82 million on patronage.
1 year patronage.
Exactly.
Are you one of the 3,500 whom Mulroney is going to appoint when his time comes before he turns to anything other than a Conservative?
One of the 3,500 he's
Come
going to
off
appoint?
it, Chuck. He said clear as a bell when his patronage came up, there are 3,500 Tories whom I will first appoint before I look at anybody of any different political stripe.
Yes, he did say that.
And are you one of them who will get your reward eventually?
Not as long as I'm in the House of Commons.
And of course, when you leave the House of Commons, will you be seeking patronage such as the Liberals get in great gobs?
I will be seeking, when I leave the House of Commons, sir, a beautiful racetrack and a sunny climate and quiet days with a beach to spend time on.
And 75,000 a year as a senator to keep you at the betting wicket.
First of all, senators make 62,000, and secondly,
Plus
senators
tax-free
have to turn up.
allowances. It equals 75,000. So you don't want a Senate seat?
No, I don't want a Senate seat.
Good. How about chairman of the CTC, which Marchand has at the moment?
I think what I would prefer, Jack, would be chairman of the CRTC so we could have some chats about unequal broadcasting.
Mr. Cook is exhibiting the incipient Tory wish to censor and black out all criticism of his party, as demonstrated recently by Mr. Mulroney in this very town, in this very studio.
Boy, when you go off on a kick. Jack, you noticed when I insulted you, there was one thing I didn't say.
You didn't say I was nasty.
No, I didn't say you were overpaid.
You said overstuffed.
Yeah,
Good.
you are overstuffed. And you are oversensitive, but you're not overpaid, Jack. I deliberately left that out.
Are you in favor of
For your kind of tirade, you should be getting an extra $100,000 a year from this place.
Are you in favor of affirmative action?
You have to describe to me exactly what you mean by affirmative
All right,
action.
I'll tell you. It means that where there is a vacancy in federal government or in Crown corporations, a woman gets it in the same manner as French Canadians got it to redress the balance of percentage of positions of power for specific groups. You know, it was 27% French Canadians in the civil service.
It's 15% women now. Mulroney has promised to bring it up to 30% as rapidly as possible. It is the law of the land. It has not been enforced by the Liberal Party. It will be by a Conservative government.
Are you talking about affirmative action or equal pay for work of equal value?
I'm talking about affirmative action in this case.
I see. And you're all for the $50 million for rape relief centres?
Of course.
What about $300 million for daycare for the middle class?
What will happen when the government is formed by the Conservative Party is an all-party House of Commons committee will look into the whole question of daycares, because we really don't know all the facts across the country.
Chuck,
it must be redressed. It must be redressed properly.
What is the tactical situation in Burnaby? You only won by the narrowest of margins last year. Gordon Gibson, where is Gordon Gibson? Last time had 15,300 and you had 16,007.
Gordon ran one whale of a campaign.
Did he run a better campaign than Iona?
Well, quite frankly, Jack, in my humble opinion, Gordon Gibson is the best Liberal that this province has produced in a couple of generations.
He's not running this time.
That's right.
Iona, what do you think of Iona?
She's a nice woman.
Is she? Have you got her slaughtered?
What?
Have you got her beaten?
I don't know, Jack. We've got a week to
Remember, Jack,
go.
to use simple words. Have you got her potentially defeated?
Well, we're working hard, and we will find out in a week's time.
I want you to hang around, Chuck, because we're going to have a round robin with a couple of your enemies this morning.
They're not my enemies. I get along with Ian pretty well. I've just met the other gentleman here. And I just want to make sure of one thing, Jack. Just be as brutal, as rude, and as uncouth as you've been to me to them. Would you mind?
You mean as blunt and direct and simple so you could understand the question? I
Right.
will after the break. Who is Paul Manning? Paul Manning used to work for the Prime Minister Trudeau in Ottawa. Paul Manning became more recently a senior official of BC Place. Much to many people's mystified ponderings, Manning gave up that job, not a cushy job, but a well-paid job for social credit, to run in Vancouver Centre against Carney. There is an NDP there too. Why? Are you sorry now, faced as you are with devastation, humiliation and destruction, if the polls are correct, that you gave up that nice, cushy job at BC Place when you were carving your niche, if it ever gets built? Or did you leave BC Place because you thought it's going to go on the back burner and drift away into the sands of time?
Well, one, you stand up for what you believe in. And for me, that's always been the West, and getting Canada more involved in the West, and now's an important time with Expo and different things happening in this city, to have a member of Parliament from Vancouver Centre that gets Canada helping Vancouver. Second thing is I'm a Liberal. And I think there's one thing that's a problem in this province, and there is no common ground. Everything seems to be right or left or this or that, and I think it's time we had some common ground in the middle.
Why didn't you
The
run
third thing that's very important is John Turner. I think there's a historic gesture happening to the West, and after some years of the West feeling very left out, the leader of the Liberal Party, the leader of a national party, is standing up here for British Columbia, and I'm proud to be standing with him.
So therefore, you gave up your cushy job at BC Place for straight political dedication and devotion to John Turner, right?
There's a lot in that. There's a lot in that. And first of all, there was nothing cushy about BC Place. If you go back and remember the stories as that stadium was getting built, it was something it got the same sort of treatment as it was building as the Liberal Party is getting during this election.
Just while you're on the subject, you were kind of Mr. Fix-It for Jimmy Patterson. Do you approve of the way McClelland has handled the things, or have they created a potential botch-up?
I'm really concerned that the messages we're sending out about this World's Fair in Vancouver beyond our borders are not messages of welcome, something special is happening
But
here.
it's entirely the fault of the unions, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's entirely the fault of the unions. I think what's necessary is for everybody involved to sit down and have some sort of a peace pact. We can't keep fighting about Expo here and expect people outside of here to want to come to Vancouver in 1986.
So here you are, you're going to be defeated in Centre on
Now, hold on a second.
On September the 5th, have you got a guarantee of your job back at BC Place?
No, I'm unlikely. First of all, I'm going to Ottawa after September 4th. And because there's one thing that's happening in this election. One election's over. Everybody's pummeled the Liberals and pummeled Turner and gotten even with Trudeau and taken it out on whatever they think is real or perceived grievances with what essentially is a pretty good country and a half-decent government for the last little while. And now people are starting to think, well, wait a minute, what do we want for this country?
Fair enough, but let's get down to cases. Carney beat the NDP by 2,000 votes the last time and also beat the Libs by 2,000 votes, correct?
Vancouver Centre is a three-party riding, and for a long time it had a Liberal and a Liberal cabinet minister by the name of Basford, and it involved things like Granville Island. It involved
he spent $20 million in Granville Island.
Yeah, and it's a super place. It's a super place for this city. The same thing with the Trade and Convention Centre, the same thing with a seawall walk around Stanley Park. Some good things have happened in Vancouver Centre with a Liberal member.
You've got a funny phrase, and I'll tell Ottawa you're as mad as hell. Your thing says, I'll tell Ottawa you're as mad as hell. In other words, I'll tell Ottawa that Liberals have fouled up their handling of the West, and yet here you have the goal to run for what is in effect these self-same Liberals.
Well, look at the rest of this.
No, but look at that.
Look at the rest
I'll tell Ottawa.
You're mad.
That's the Liberals you're mad at.
It's British Columbia's turn now. That's what I'm saying, and that's what I'm saying. That's with a Prime Minister running out here. It's with some very good people standing up with him, whether it be Dave Broussard or Iona Campanola or Nancy Morrison.
Liberalism is caring about people without turning into a wimp. Who are the wimps? Are the NDPers wimps? Are the Tories wimps? Or is it only the Liberals who are not wimps?
Let's just say you have to be more judicious in the application of public funds than might have happened in the past.
Tell me some of the Liberal faults then. Where did they throw away public funds? Apart from this ghastly stench of patronage.
That's a nice cross to carry during an election, I'll tell you.
You carry the cross. I mean, the patronage issue is really quite repulsive, isn't it?
Yes.
Did you expect Trudeau to be so uncaring and a bit of a wimp in doing that to Turner? Did he do that deliberately to Turner? Did he say, I'm going to fix you, Turner?
Well, I think a lot of politics is human beings, and human nature being what it is, I think some people asked for some things as he was stepping down. And I'll say what I've said before. If Bryce Mackesy had the interests of the Liberal Party at heart, he would resign that posting. He wouldn't, I mean...
well, at least you know from Webster, because Turner did speak to me, that if Portugal doesn't accept him, he's out in the cold, cold snow.
I wonder if Mr. Turner hasn't sent a message to Portugal not to accept him. I don't know.
Would you recommend it? Did he do that? See, that shows your training in Ottawa. The way to get it is to get Portugal to say for sure we don't want him.
Maybe they've sent a slow... The fact is, Bryce Mackesy shouldn't be there. And maybe there's a message been sent quietly to Portugal that take as long as you want, but don't put Bryce in there.
But there are some other shocking appointments there too. But I won't humiliate you by going into the details at this moment, except to say that you're not involved in any of them, and unlikely to be, because there's no way you can form a government, the Liberals.
Well, wait a minute.
You can't.
Jack, there's one thing that happens during an election, and that's, in the end, is people walking into the ballot booth, and if there's a sense of fairness and there's some common sense out there, and people, particularly in British Columbia, appreciate the fact that Turner's running here and the caliber of candidates standing up with him, this thing is far from over.
I'll see you at the Soft Rock Cafe, but before I see you at the Soft Rock Cafe, we'll bring in Ian Waddell to do a shot with Ian. Because Sven Robinson won't come to my program, but he's running. Where is Sven Robinson running?
He's running where Mike Hillman's going to win that seat out in Burnaby.
Mike who?
Mike Hillman.
Never heard of him.
Well, he's going to be the new Liberal MP out in Burnaby.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, no, Sven's got that sewn up.
There's a secret happening out here in
wants-
British Columbia, and it's a Liberal resurgence.
Well, it's a secret. It's a well-kept secret, too. Ian Waddell after the break.
Who has fought in the great NDP tradition of civil liberties in this country, and that's going to go down.
30 seconds.
Ian Waddell, to be fair to him, I tend to call him Waddell, the Glasgow pronunciation, has certainly made his mark in Vancouver-Kingsway, but he's got troubles on his back, too. Why won't Robinson appear in my program? You tell me, I won't nag you if you'll tell me the answer, which you know.
Well, I don't know. You have to ask Robinson about that. He's been on your program a number of times, and it's been pretty good television. I
Do you
enjoyed
support
watching it.
his particular amendments to the criminal code covering a certain subject which would result in a certain situation?
Me personally?
Yeah.
No.
You vote against whorehouses in Vancouver.
Oh, I don't want them in my riding, and
Do you want them in
I don't think-
anybody else's?
No.
Good.
As long as they're not in my riding.
You want them in anybody else's?
No,
riding?
I don't want them in anybody else's riding.
Will you fight within the NDP to prevent the Robinson influence becoming dominant?
Well, Robinson said a lot of things, some of which have come true. Now, to be fair, I have my own views on it, and they're a little more conservative
Well, I'll ask
than
Mr.
his.
Broadbent about it tomorrow
You ask
anyway,
him.
so I don't have to nag you about that, do I? Nancy Morrison, your opponent. Who is Nancy Morrison? Is she
I
the
don't know,
woman
Annette.
who used to be a judge?
That's right.
And
Used to
she's
be a
not-
city prosecutor when I was a city prosecutor, too.
You were
We
a
bo-
city
yeah.
You sent common people to jail.
No, I was defense counsel, too. The judges
said
sent
you
them
were
to
city
jail.
prosecutor.
I was a prosecutor. That's right.
And she was a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And she was a judge.
Yeah.
And now she's a lawyer.
Yes.
Back in practicing
guess,
law again.
yeah.
She said that you were the recipient of liberal patronage.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I nearly fell off my sun chair on the deck at Salt Spring when I was reading all this stuff.
Well, you would think liberals would know patronage when they see it, but
They certainly do.
But I'm not. I worked for Judge Tom Berger. Berger was appointed in 1972 to head or 73 to head this inquiry into the oil and gas and the native rights in the North. He hired me as counsel. He hired me. I got paid from the government. I
that's
worked for
what
him
she
for 3
says
years.
was
She said
patronage.
that was. So if you're a postman, you're getting liberal patronage. Or if you're a government worker, you're getting liberal
Well, you
patronage.
know, people whisper, so I'll whisper. Somebody said you worked in Prime Pearson's office as a correspondence secretary.
No, I worked as a volunteer for Pearson when I was 19. I was an assistant of his. I was a university student. I was 19.
An assistant of Pearson's in Ottawa.
No, not in Ottawa. I went around with him in Ontario for a while. I knew him quite well, and I admired his foreign policy.
But you shucked off this soft liberal philosophy and
Yeah.
went for the true socialism. NDP.
I realized then that the Liberal Party was declining, and you're seeing it in this election. This may be their last gasp.
Oh, it was an opportunistic jump. If they'd been winning, you would
Oh.
have stayed with them.
That was about 21 years ago. It's taken us a long time to knock this Liberal Party down.
So
you know?
you are now how old?
41.
41.
Yeah, getting old.
Beginning to look at
I know.
again.
When I first appeared in your program,
You're
just a young
smooth,
lawyer.
cheap
Yeah.
little boy.
Yeah.
So that was the extent of it. So Nancy Morrison is wrong when she said you were the recipient of liberal
Yes,
patronage.
dead wrong.
The next thing, you created quite a stir with your expose on immigration, and I was surprised to see a guy with such a high ethnic content in his writing attacking any aspect of immigration. What was the aspect you attacked?
Well, I went to Hong Kong, and I talked to the top immigration officials there, and they told me things that it was difficult for them to say publicly. Only I could say it in the House of Commons, and I could say it outside the House of Commons. And that was because of the situation in Hong Kong, because of its, you know, the deal with China, and people are wondering, is Hong Kong going to survive? A lot of people want to come to Canada. They want to get out of Hong Kong, and some of them are desperate. So we got Canadian so-called immigration consultants, some of them not even lawyers, who would go there, rent a hotel room, put an ad in the paper, charge a big fee, $15,000 a shot at some of them, and give advice, some of which they could get by just going to the Canadian High Commission.
Is it not a fact, Mr. Waddell, and I'm the last person to raise this, that immigration procedures in Canada traditionally have been and still are full of rackets and fixings, with a fair amount of forgeries?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, rackets and fixing and forgeries.
You know what's happened in some...
I deal with immigration all the time. You know, I have an old storefront office.
In other words, you attack those rich fiddlers who could afford to pay $15,000 to some Canadian, quote, councillor in Hong Kong.
Right, and I think that's exploitation.
Milking the people.
Right, of course, and I don't believe that you should be able to buy your way into Canada.
You can, of course. The new Liberal policy is that an entrepreneur who's going to employ one or more persons can walk into the country. You know that, don't you?
Yes, and I think that policy is wrong. I think that the family reunification policy is the better policy.
Who was the guy who did the advertising in Hong Kong? Did you name him?
Well, there were a number of people that did advertising in Hong Kong, not just one. You're referring to my conservative opponent, who also happens to be, I understand, has been doing advertisement on the Progressive Conservative logo.
Yeah, I don't understand it. You either know it or you don't know it. Did he or didn't he?
Well, I'm told that he did.
You're told that he did? You're a liar. Is this
I'm told that he did. No, I'm telling you what the Vancouver Sun said. I'm told that he made an advertisement in the...
Didn't you check this out yourself?
I spoke about all the different lawyers that were doing it. Wong wasn't the only guy that was doing this. There were a lot of people that were doing it.
And you think Wong was Wong in doing it?
Well, I think that's the wrong remark to say.
And two whites don't make a Wong.
Well,
I gotta have a little laugh. Have I made a boo-boo?
Well, you made a bit of a boo-boo. I'll tell you, it's pretty
Can you have
sensitive.
a joke at all about anything nowadays?
Oh, of course you can have a joke. You can have a joke, but I guess it's no joke if you're you know, you're paying $15,000 and you're not getting into Canada.
See what Charlie Lynch calls me this morning. If he was here, I'd belt him.
What did he call you?
Snotty column in the province this morning. Goodness, and I bought him a drink last night. I pick up the paper this morning, here he cuts my throat from ear to ear. Where are you, Charlie?
Well, that's...
Go play your mouth organ, Charlie. You play your mouth organ better than you write a column.
They call that journalist ethics, don't they?
There is no honor among thieves, as you well know.
Yeah.
And I exclude myself from that description, but I include all my friends. Okie dokie, we're going to talk candidates and policies with your very good friends, Manning the Liberal, the party you moved away from, and Tory, Cook the Tory, you know, the guy away on the far right, after the break. I have three actually reasonably good friends of mine here this morning. I know you'll find it hard to believe. Commencing, of course, with Chuck Cook, who worked with me on CJOR 20 years ago.
A lot of years, Jack. A lot of years.
Paul Manning, whom I dealt with when he was in the PMO and the Expo and everywhere else, as ex-newspaper man. Oh, by the way, you dropped in the soup with Marjorie Nichols or somebody when you said that you had found a typewriter, so you learned how to hunt and peck and ipso facto became a journalist. Is that what you said, you indelicate fellow?
I think it was at a nomination meeting, and I was talking about how I'd gotten to be standing up as a Liberal in Vancouver Centre, and I said I'd been a journalist for a while, and I think I said I wanted to go out and reform the world, and I knew how to type, and it was that easy. And
that was the only qualification you had to be a journalist?
No, I think some people took umbrage and a little bit too much on that.
I had the little rumor, and I get it from either one of you too. Now, I know that Turner phoned Jack Monroe personally and said, Jack Monroe of the IWA, run for the victorious party, and God knows what your future might be. How about Harcourt? Was Harcourt thinking of running for the Libs?
Well, he came down and endorsed me at the opening of my office. He said, I think, publicly that all three parties had asked him to run at one point.
Were you involved in asking Harcourt to run for the Liberals? I mean, I don't want to do Mike any damage, but you people were so desperate, you were casting around everywhere.
Wait a minute. I mean, to be fair to everybody, the Liberal Party has been moribund in British Columbia, and
moribund.
Yeah, and we wanted
dead.
We wanted to put together the best team of British Columbians that we could in a new Liberal Party. And yes, I asked Mike Harcourt. I said, if you were interested in Expo, if you're interested in getting housing done in this city, if you're interested in the city and getting Canada to help it, why don't you run for the Liberals in Vancouver Centre? And he thought about it and decided he couldn't. I think Mike Harcourt would have been a good addition to the Liberal team.
Jack Turner would have been Jack Monroe would have been a great addition.
You know,
can I just
Michael Harcourt is a moderate, compassionate.
For God's sake, don't say he's a Liberal or he'll sue me.
No, that's a delightful statement. It simply indicates the little red rump in the Liberal Party in this province. There really isn't any difference between the NDP and the Liberals, and that's why the NDP should get thrown out this time so that we can have a very strong Conservative caucus. But when he's running around recruiting obvious NDP members to run for the Liberals, it certainly adds more evidence to the fact that they are really ganging up on us again.
Well, wait a minute, Chuck, can I just on Chuck?
Just 1 second, please. Mr.
Well,
Waddell's
this
rump.
line of the old little red rump is a broken record, Chuck. The fact is that we've set the agenda in this election. Broadbent said it. We're talking about taxation. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about interest rates. I think we certainly haven't been any rump. We've been, in fact, leading the agenda in this election. And the other thing I'd like to say...
But you know why, of course? Because you have you need to have no responsibility for what you say.
Not at all. We've got a great deal of responsibility.
There's no danger of you forming the government.
This could be a minority parliament.
Even...
Oh, no.
Oh, come on. It could be. Plus, we've had... look at our influence in this particular election. You could have said that at the beginning of the election. For example, taxing the rich. We put that thing forward as one of the first items on the agenda. Broadbent went to Bay Street and said the rich should pay their fair taxes, and now we've got the other two parties starting to talk about that.
With respect, Ian, I mean, the NDP stands up there and they say they're for equality for women, fair taxation, this, that, and everybody's in favor of what you're talking about.
And motherhood.
It's a question of who can get it done. And with all due respect, I mean, everyone's talking about the polls, everyone's talking about a Tory landslide, an election being over, and I say, who can get it done? It's the Liberal Party, and there is room for people that care and people with compassion that want to get some things done that aren't Tory. It seems to me, my friend Mr. Cook, that most Tories seem to be anti-Liberal rather than pro-something, that the Liberal Party is time.
With the mess you guys have made of this country, of course, if you're not anti-Liberal, you're not thinking very clearly.
Let's talk about the mess. Let's talk about the mess. Where would you rather live in Canada? Where would you rather live in British Columbia? And where would you rather live in the city of Vancouver? And as soon as you get in, if you get in, you're going to start saying how wonderful things are since the day a Tory government got in there.
Jack,
and what I'm saying is things are not that bad in this country. They could be better, and they will be better.
You tell that to
a
1.5 million unemployed.
Do you want to know what upsets me, gentlemen? I'll tell you what upsets me. Not one of the three parties or their leaders has come forward with any credible plan to create employment. $10,000, $15,000 loans from you, $10,000 loans from you, $10,000 grants from you. Phony youth chance, $50 a week for standing around watching somebody work.
I disagree.
Nothing specific.
Well, can I first of all reply, or we'll all be talking? I'll just be brief. Two things. One is this idea of Western Canada that Manning talked about. You know, it's not like instant potatoes. You can't just phone Jack Monroe up or Mike Harcourt up and create instant Liberals. You have to work at it in the area. We've had grassroots. Those guys are NDPers for good reason.
And still are.
Sure they are. And the second thing is, when you approach job creation, you've got to look at the bigger picture. You've got to say that we've had a policy, the government has had a policy, of creating unemployment to fight inflation. You've got to tackle it.
That is the Tory policy, isn't it? That's the Tory policy.
That's what the Liberals have done, Jack.
They've been using Tory policies.
With the greatest respect, I mean, I've been around the working world for something like 16 years. It happened to coincide when Trudeau came in. We've seen the participation of women go up from 37% to 52%. We've seen 3 million jobs created in this country, which is a better record than anything else. Sure, there's people out of work, Jack, but the best record of job creation, and it's not good enough, has been under a Liberal
Gentlemen,
government.
I must get this back under control. Do you not agree with me? Pretend there are no cameras here. We're all, quote, off the record on
Sitting in a back room, smoking
a back room,
yep, sure.
smoking a cigarette. When I watched that women's debate, I very nearly flew up. Did you ever see three grown men, two of them certainly, pander so dreadfully to special interest groups?
Well, how can a special interest group be 52% of the electorate?
These
And the other
particular
thing-
groups, I don't think the
Jack,
women's
I'll tell
rights
you.
is an issue of any great importance in this campaign.
It's not women's rights you're talking about. We're talking about the human factor, and a lot of the issues that were talked about there are whether it be single parents, whether it be education of children, whether it be the nuclear question. All those things are things that affect people in
Jack,
every community.
In Kingsway, women's rights, in a sense, if you use the broad term, is important for a group that wasn't in that debate, and that is older women. Some of the seniors, some of the women between
That's
60
a question, though.
That's, they should have had one of those women who had been active before.
What did you think of the women's rights debate?
Jack, I agree with you. I thought all three leaders pandered terribly to a group of very strong feminists. They really didn't deal with what I would consider the major women's issues in this country.
You said it better than I did. Thank you. So boo, boo, boo.
I think you walk around during an election, it seems every room you go in is a special interest group, and the point is that you try and raise that special interest into some common cause, and that's getting this country rolling.
Look, I'm in the business of taking phone calls. Let's take some phone calls.
Okay.
'Cause I've been hiding all summer, just like Mulroney was hiding last week.
When are you going to get off that kick? You're
Never,
being terribly
ever.
unfair. Well, you know you're being unfair.
What do you mean unfair?
Come on,
Just
Chuck
what I
Cook.
said.
What do
You're
you mean?
terribly unfair.
Even
Mulroney made a
Trudeau, who
calculated
hated
decision
us.
to stay away from Webster.
Atkins made the calculated decision to keep him away
Well,
from
who's
me.
running the party?
Atkins
Atkins or
is.
Mulroney?
Jack, just
Jack,
before you take a
wait
phone
a
call
minute.
on Cook, this bit of Mulroney hiding from this is not just Mulroney. They are hiding their candidates in a number of candidates. They have a few
He's
token
here.
candidates.
He's here.
Cook and a couple of other ones who have had experience and who have the Wizard of Ooze over here, who can go right around everything. But they don't put any of their new candidates in the thing. And this is a group that thinks they're going to win 200 seats and be accountable to the Canadian people after that. I think we're in real trouble. the
Say
way
that
these guys-
again. You're saying that the Tories in
I'm
BC,
saying the
and
Tories
Marjorie Nichols wrote it too, and I know that Mike Latta and Cam Loops has been invisible.
Look, I found that in Ottawa, I phoned Ottawa yesterday, and I found that people were going to the ethnic communities there, saying that they had a candidate of an ethnic community running in my riding in Toronto who was a visible candidate, and then I go to my riding and they're hiding the candidate. And they're doing it with Latta and Kamloops. They're doing it with other people.
Are they hiding your Tory in Kingsway?
I haven't seen my Tory. He hasn't been to one
What's his
meeting.
name is Mr. Wong.
Yeah, he hasn't been to one meeting, one all candidates meeting. He hasn't been to one of the dinners. I mean, the Liberals and the Greens and the Communists, they've been to all the things. These guys are hiding their candidates and they're being unaccountable to the Canadian people, and that's
I
a bad
can't answer
omen.
for any other candidate. I'm here.
Will
Jack,
you give him special permission to be out, to come out of the
Yeah,
closet
let
for
him
the
out.
campaign?
Jack, just one thing on the Mulroney thing. Remember, he was here at this station that morning to do question period for the CTV network. Now, a couple of million listeners, as opposed to your 300, makes an awful lot of sense that he concentrate
I
on
hate
that show
to tell you,
than
but the
your
6
show.
o'clock news on BCTV has twice the audience that question period has nationally. So stick that in there.
400,000?
We have 685,000 listeners on a 6 o'clock news, which is twice the national audience of CTV question period.
And it
But
only
let me-
goes into BC.
Let me, and a hell of a lot of fringe country around it. Let me tell you
Watch your
something
language.
else. I run this program. You go for comment. Let me tell you that, guys, you put me off my stride there. But
Go
let
ahead,
me tell
tell
you
Strength
that it
of the
was
news.
6 weeks ago. We offered to do Mulroney anywhere at any time in any part of the country by satellite or whatnot, and I would go and get him. And all your good friends of mine, you got him, virtually assured. You got him.
The
And
BC campaign
then,
director, Jim
totally.
McCauley, told me that you never once phoned the head of the BC campaign.
Why would
to
I
ask-
phone Macaulay? Who did I deal with? I dealt with MPs and Pat Carney and the campaign office here, and tried and
You
not.
didn't phone the right people.
Macaulay's
Jack.
of
You
no
phoned the head of
consequence
the
to me.
campaign in
And
BC.
I phoned Fox and I phoned, but I couldn't go through to Fox, but I couldn't get through to what you call him. What's his name? Atkins.
Jackie.
Tried to get Harry Neer, spoke to Liza Van Doon, and finally got a message from an office boy. He knew damn
Mulroney knew
fine.
you wanted to talk to him, and the whole Tory campaign is based on the premise that everyone's ready to get even with the Liberals and throw them out, and all the Tories have to do is stand up and say the world will be wonderful with us.
Jack,
And
you made a mistake. You should have phoned Patrick Kinsella and maybe Bill Bennett.
As a
We've
matter of
seen
fact, if you want to know, Kinsella was involved in the negotiations, and I say that now because he's going to spread a lot of inaccurate nonsense, and I spoke to...
No more than you do, Jack.
Furthermore, it
no more than you
wasn't a
do.
question of Webster. It was a question of Webster and every other reporter, because not one national reporter in this country thought the story strong enough to stand up to Mulroney and say, now call a halt and face the press. Not one in any part of Canada until Webster set the tone. After the break. Gentlemen, we've all said our little pieces. I am now going to take telephone calls, and I want to issue a kind of general instruction. When you're waiting on the telephone, you hear the line feed in the earpiece. You turn the volume down. And if you want to make my day happy and smiling, as it has been up to now, when you come on, I don't care what you say, providing you say it clearly and succinctly and directly. And by the end of last year, we'd managed to wipe out that incredible telephone phenomenon, talk show phenomenon, from which I suffered even more because I did it so many more years than Chuck Cook. Hello, is that you, Mr. Webster? Can I speak to Mr. Cook? Mr. Cook is here. Go ahead. Hello, Mr. Cook. How are you today, Mr. Cook? Which drives the old pros like myself and everybody else in the business round the bleeding bend. Come on and say, Waddell, yuck. Cook, snap. Manning, go home. Loud, clear, and succinct. Go ahead. Oh, no, hold on, please. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have two questions for Bill Clarke.
Bill Clarke. Bill is gone. Chuck will answer them.
Okay, number one is he going to raise or cut back on the welfare in BC? And question number two is he going to meet Turner's thing about the jobs for 25,000 jobs this year and 100,000 next year, or is he going to be less than that?
Okay, Chuck.
First of all, the number of jobs created will be more than that. Secondly, in terms of welfare in BC, that's a provincial matter. You'll have to talk to the provincial government about their welfare, size of their welfare payments. But there will be no cutback in federal spending.
And you will match any promise the Libs make.
Match any promise? We'll probably outdo them. They've been lying about promises for generations.
He shouldn't get away with this. Look, the thing is that they have no job creation policy. All they've got is to follow the Americans, and it's not going to work. The money's going to go to the states. Let me finish.
Private sector.
Private sector, but the private sector is not investing in jobs. They're sending the money home to the Americans. They're investing it in mergers. They're pocketing it. You got to get money into people's pockets, to the ordinary people's pockets, so they can start buying things. So, you know, there is no job creation policy. The other thing is that John Crosby said, remember, well, won't tell you what we're going to do because you'd never elect us. And John Crosby's the finance critic of the Conservative Party. Sure, and they're going to cut the deficit, and that means they're going to cut social programs and pensions and so on for Canadians. You can bet
Manning.
Well, just everybody talks about this government program for here, and this government's going to create that. We've got the vehicle for jobs already in this city, and a lot of jobs have been created.
What is it?
You got rapid transit coming together. You got a trade and convention center. You got a World's Fair coming, and if everybody just gets together, small business can get going for this. You can leave permanent benefits behind in the sense of centers and jobs. The vehicle is here in this city.
Okay, enough social credit propaganda.
That's not social credit propaganda. Canada's involved in that fair.
Yeah, it's
and
going
Canada's
up there.
not enough involved in that fair.
Go
Canada's
ahead from
host
Nanaimo,
nation.
please. From Nanaimo, please. Go ahead from Nanaimo. Are you there? Okay, you're next. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
All four of your panel members respond to, but I'll address the question to the Tories. What would the Tories do to enforce the federal government board's own very strict rules and regulations of financial accountability? That is, of using federal government money grants for the original purpose for which they were intended, and apply this enforcement to the British Columbia government, specifically that money allocated for the Department of Education and the Department of Health.
Oh, you're talking about the fears that much federal grants go directly into the pockets of social credit instead of going to the named beneficiary.
Well, it's already been stated, and Mulroney has stated it, that if the money is allocated for a specific purpose, it should be used for that purpose. That's part of the answer to his question.
Well, then why did the Conservatives vote against my motion in the House of Commons, which would stop the Liberal government from cutting back $372 million in educational grants? I made a motion there to stop that. Cook and his friends voted against it.
Ian, I think I'd vote against anything you brought up. As a pure socialist measure, this country's got to get moving again.
Listen, the point is that federal tax dollars that are supposedly going to the province to help out on education ought to go to education, and the dollars ought to go where they were directed in the first place.
All agreed. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack?
Yes.
Yeah, my question is for Mr. Waddell.
Yes?
What I was wondering, why is it that we in the West who want real change in Ottawa should support the NDP, the party that supported the Liberals on the Constitution and the National Energy Program, and it was the NDP that introduced the motion that defeated the Clarke government, the first government that gave the West proper representation in Ottawa for quite a long time?
Okay, that's a good question.
First of all, it'll happen again, won't it?
No, if you want real change, you're not going to get any real change. I want real change, too. I've had it up to here with the Liberals. They're finished. If you want some real change, you need to go, you need to really make the change. Their policies are no different than what the Liberals have been doing. The Conservative policies have been the same. It's, you know, the Bobsey plans. But, and let me just
I'll
finish
get all this from Broadbent tomorrow.
All right. I'll tell you something about the Clarke government. The Clarke defeated himself. 2 Tory backbenchers told me we wanted an election. We wanted to have an election.
For goodness sake, don't do that. You ganged up, as you well know, with the left to defeat the Tories.
It was an NDP motion that brought down the government.
Joe Clarke wanted an election. He thought he was John Diefenbaker.
Nonsense.
No, it's not nonsense.
It is nonsense.
It is not nonsense, Jack.
He didn't count heads, that's all.
Well, he couldn't count, and so
he could count.
It was good fortune in the
He's
sense
not
that
that
Trudeau
guy.
ended up in Quebec for the referendum. But Clarke and the Tories thought that all they had to do was have the government defeated and they get a Diefenbaker
Let's
landslide.
dump on Waddell now. Let's dump on you.
Well,
No,
before
it's
you dump
true.
on me, give me 30 seconds on this.
No,
Clarke has
20.
been going around BC and saying this. The fact is, Joe Clarke wanted to be defeated. He thought he was Diefenbaker. He had.
It's history.
Of course, it's history, but they shouldn't go
I
around
have a
saying
simple
it.
question for you, which
Go
I'll
ahead.
put to your leader tomorrow.
Well, put it to me now.
I don't want you to answer. I'll take you half an hour.
All right.
If the NDP, by some miraculous sleight of hand, became the government of Canada, what would they socialize? The banks? Foreign exchange controls? Would they nationalize the woods? CBR? CNR? Would
Look,
they make us into one fast Swedish type dead democracy?
You know, we haven't been saying that in this election.
I
and
know
that's
you
not-
haven't, but that's not what you believe.
That
No,
is
no,
NDP
no.
policy.
Wait a minute.
$42
Wait,
billion
wait,
worth
wait.
of nationalization.
No, wait,
It's
wait.
all NDP
Wait a minute.
policy. It's written down and
Wait,
it's there,
wait.
Ian. Don't deny
Before
it.
Chuck gets in, you asked me what we would do.
Yeah.
I said
If
that
you had power
if we had
instead.
power, we would make job creation number one over fighting, rather than just fighting inflation. We would tackle the interest rates, which the other parties won't
You'd
do.
arbitrarily reduce them for
We
domestic
would
level.
reduce. We'd have made in Canada interest rates.
You'd have currency controls
Nice idea,
only
but
on
won't work.
only on the hot money, not on the average
to
person.
prevent Canadians putting money in the States. And
Yeah.
businesses
Yeah,
sending money
we
to
want the
States.
money invested in Canada in the interest
You
rates
would
lower.
you'd wipe out all corporate incentives and you'd hammer the corporate for tax.
No, it's a mixed system. We would only give corporate incentives to people who are producing jobs and
Exchange
apprenticeship-
controls? Can only take so much money across the border when you
I've
go down
gotta
to
go.
visit Bellingham?
It
Can you
means
give
there would
me-
be no money coming into Canada too, Ian. You forget that.
You've got to give me your last day
NDP just prints money.
platform so that I can really take Broadbent through it one at a time and find out what he'd really do. I mean, he's a great nag. And he hammered them into taxing the rich. He hammered them into $50 million for Maple Leaf Centre, $600 million for daycare. Didn't he?
Sure.
Didn't he?
Sure.
How can
And
we afford it?
well, easily. I'll tell you how we can afford it. If you want to hear, we're going to stop the
No, I don't
grants
wanna hear.
that
I'll be
Cook
back.
and his boys are giving to oil companies.
Oh, you mean the
Us,
grants?
we haven't been the government.
They voted for it.
They gave him it.
They gave it, and they voted for
We
it.
did not vote for the National Energy Program. The National Energy Program has been the biggest tragedy in terms of jobs in this
And-
country
Yeah,
in
but
a
you guys-
generation.
you guys are-
14 billion left
And will
this country.
Mulroney wipe it out?
Yeah, you guys
Yes,
are
it'll be
wa-
changed.
Mulroney will wipe it out after the break. Go ahead from Kelowna, sir.
Victoria, Jack.
Victoria, my mistake.
Yes, good morning. My question, of course, is for Mr. Cook. I'd like to know if he could tell me a little bit about the power block that Mr. Mulrooney is now setting up in Quebec and Ontario. Seems like exactly the same thing that Mr. Pierre Trudeau had. And I think that I'd like him to name some of the cabinet ministers that will come from BC. At least in British Columbia, we will have John Turner, and back in Quebec, we will have Jean Chrétien. It seems to be spread across Canada, and I think the Conservatives have something to answer for in this power block system with Michael Wilson, Flora MacDonald, and people like them in the Ontario-Quebec side. Where is BC going to be represented?
Well, very simple answer to that, sir. We have 6 cabinet ministers, 6 shadow cabinet ministers, plus the whip from BC.
You're the whip.
That's right. You've got some outstanding people out here.
Yeah, but Mr. Mulrooney owes a lot of debts to Ontario and Quebec now.
You got it.
No.
Isn't he going to start paying those debts to PQ-type people and things like that?
All right, let's take 200 seats. Presume we get 200 seats.
Well,
you realize more than a quarter of those seats will come from Western Canada. And if you think people like Mazankowski in Alberta, people like Fraser, Carney at the coast, are not going to be fighting to ensure that Western Canada gets their fair share of representation in cabinet and also their fair share of what's going on. The Western Caucus is too large to ignore.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Yesterday morning, I called into Mr. Turner, and Jack was screening the calls there off the air, and he asked me what my topic was. I told him succinctly, and he said, "To hell with you," and cut me off.
What was your topic, and did I say something?
I'm not calling this morning to talk about the topic. I'm talking about the principle.
Oh, yes. Well, what was your topic?
My topic is, which one of you politicians there, particularly you, Paul Mann...
What was the question you wanted to ask Turner yesterday?
Well, I don't want to... I have a different question for you.
Oh, I know. Just a moment, please. Just a moment. This was a gentleman who called and said, I want to discuss with John Turner the revamping of the marijuana laws. And I said, on a major interview with a national political leader, to hell with you, and cut him off the air, for which I make absolutely no apology. Go ahead, please.
I have a question for Mr. Waddell.
Yes?
There's something that was bothering me in the last session of Parliament. I can understand the Liberals and the Tories going for it, but why did the NDP support Bill C-169 in the House of Commons?
What's 169?
Oh, that's the Election Act changes. The National Citizens Coalition.
Oh, yes, that very good action brought by the National Citizens Coalition when you were trying to restrict our freedom of speech.
Well, there were a lot of... it was an all-party thing. I admit...
you voted for it.
Eh? No, I didn't vote for it.
Your party voted for it.
It voted.
Was that a mistake?
I don't think it was a mistake. I disagree with it personally. I think that you can't. I'm a civil liberty. I didn't vote for it.
Your party voted.
My party voted. His party voted. His party. But I've been a civil liberties lawyer, and I don't believe in restricting the rights of anybody to advertise or whatever in an election. But you know there are problems with the National Citizens
Okay, thank you.
Coalition.
We got an answer. Your party voted for it. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Cook, when you told NewsHour reporter Harvey Overfeld that you know but won't say what parliamentarian it is that owes the parliamentary dining hall $7,000 in unpaid-for meals, were you shielding a Tory, a Liberal, or an NDP MP?
A Liberal.
I'm taking it for granted it wasn't a Liberal.
It was
a Liberal. That's, you see, when you join the House of Commons, you become an amorphous mass melded together for the self-protection of each other on intimate matters.
I really don't think the public is entitled to know, particularly when the bill was paid promptly. It was brought to the attention of a good many members of all parties, I might add.
A Liberal,
and they paid their bills. And the 7,000 one happened to be a Liberal.
It's an abuse. You know, Charles Dickens called the House of Commons the best gentleman's club in London. And, you know, kind of things like that are...
No, I know you wouldn't do it, Chuck, but can you run up a tab for $7,000 in the House of Commons restaurant and get away with it?
Not anymore, you can't, because the regulations have been changed, and we had a bit to do with that,
How much are steaks in the House of Commons private dining room members restaurant? $4?
They're cheap.
Should they be? Why don't you put
they should be the same prices as...
Have you raised this with the Speaker?
Well, I've raised it in my own caucus, and I've said it publicly before on your program when you asked me about a haircut. I think that we should be paying the same price as the public's paying, obviously.
And
I got to get that's why I haven't had my hair cut for a while.
you should go to a union barber and get it properly cut. Go ahead, please.
Jack. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
The word is all over town that Mulrooney is going to devalue the dollar. Can you get an answer? I know you can't get it from Mulrooney, but can you get it from any of the PCs?
Not the good Lord themselves could get an answer to that. Impossible. You've got to make out your own supposition based on their policies. Will they let the dollar float? Will the Tories let the dollar float?
I can't answer that question. I haven't heard anything about it at all, even the rumor.
I think we've got to get a stronger economy and a healthier dollar, and it doesn't help to run around promising 336 things and taking a deficit up to lessen the strength of the economy. I mean, that's you got a problem. You got 33 cents on the dollar that's debt now. What will happen to the dollar if the Tories try and pay for everything that they've promised?
Yes, if the dollar's got to float if you're going to pay for the kind of social programs that you promise. See, this is the big issue in this campaign, and Cook over here won't even answer it. And he's talking about 200 Tory seats. You know, if they get 200 Tory seats in this House, they're going to do things like Bill Bennett did in British Columbia.
Absolute
John Crosby
nonsense.
said, "Just watch us," he said.
Absolute nonsense, and you know it. That's the most scurrilous lie of this campaign. Brian Mulroney has come out here and promised to look after Western Canada. He's come out here and stated he has nothing to do with social credit.
To look after Ontario.
Then, Mr. Cook, tell me what you're going to do with the dollar. Answer the caller's question.
Well, we're going to leave it out. The dollars, of course it's going to float. I haven't heard anything else at all.
It's going to float now. Two seconds ago, it wasn't going to float.
I didn't say that.
Get your own talk show.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. In view of the fact that Mr. Mann is bemoaning the fact that the central spectrum of the political scene out here has been wiped out, I want to ask him a couple of questions. It's a known fact that in provincial elections, both the national Liberal and Conservative party machines backed the BC Socreds instead of their own provincial candidates, and he was instrumental in persuading the BC Liberals to join the BC Socreds, which effectively wiped out the political centre in BC. So how in the heck does he have the nerve to run as a federal Liberal? And does he think that a federal Conservative government would be as confrontationally reactionary as the BC Socred one, which he so enthusiastically supports? And again,
I've got the message. That's enough. You said he's a political hypocrite who helped to wipe out the centre in BC.
Just a second. I mean, this is some woman that's read something, and so she thinks she knows about Paul Manning. And too many people think that they know what I did or didn't do. I've been a Liberal since 1974. I've worked for a Liberal government. I worked as a Liberal during Habitat. I happened to run as a Liberal in 1979, and like most Liberals in Western Canada, lost. I ended up as a Liberal, much to the protests of the Socreds that were phoning headquarters saying, "What are you hiring a Liberal for?" Doing a stadium study and writing a concept for Expo and working at BC Place. And I did that in spite of being a Liberal, and I'm proud of the things that we've done. And I've been a Liberal, and I've stayed a Liberal. And that woman is, that's the kind of scurrilous bullshit that people think they can throw around during the middle of an election. I'm a Liberal, and I've been a Liberal.
Can
I'm standing up as one now.
Can I ask Paul something on that?
I resent that.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, let me ask Paul about something a little apropos to that.
Put the question through me.
He's talked about BC Place, Manning has, about how he's so into that. I asked Trudeau a question in the House of Commons. You've got it on tape here. Did he tell Harvey Oberfeld of BC TV that he didn't care about BC and the Liberals didn't care?
You're doing a typical diversionary tactic. Trudeau couldn't have cared less at that particular moment about questions about BC Place.
Expo,
and
first of all.
And we dealt with them in the proper manner and disposed of it. Don't try and dump that.
Look at the point. Listen, but Ian, just a second, Jack. My whole point in standing up and running here, and Ian,
all right, go ahead.
Trudeau was asked something on the details of a dispute at Expo, and he said he wasn't going to bother with the details of that dispute. Canada, with some help from me, ended up supporting getting Expo. And my whole point in running here is Canada isn't helping Expo enough. If you've got a World's Fair happening in this city, and you've got a chance to launch this city, Canada ought to be more involved in helping, rather than standing off to the sidelines.
After the break. That was a diversion. There's one other subject I've got to raise. You have been very outspoken and quite bitter. You surprised me by the attacks of the media of which you were a member at one time. And you brought along a Globe Mail which you want to display as a classic example of Tory twisting. Is that right?
No, all I'm saying is, Jack...
Can you come in on that one?
This election...
This is a picture of Turner, and sticking up through the back of his head, making him look like the devil incarnate, are two, I think they're Filipino wooden forks, giant wooden forks. Is that not correct?
Jack, the problem in this election
But
is...
I want to make this clear. You accuse people of doing this deliberately to downgrade
I think that that's a disgraceful example of editorializing through pictures. And there's no question that the guy that put that on the front page knew exactly what he was trying to do.
Show me the picture again. Just the picture by itself. Close in on the picture, please.
You know, what's missing in this campaign, just a second, what's missing in this campaign is not the substance, it's all, the newspapers are filled with polls and people pounding up, people aren't talking about the substance.
I want to see that picture. I want to make a point of the colors. You see, somebody picked the most vicious-looking expression on his face tied to the horns of his head. I'm not really laughing, but that's pretty wicked.
Jack, can I make a small comment on it? I think it's just great. It's about ruddy time. We watch Stanfield with the football. We watch the wimp image you guys develop on Clarke. It's about time you got your own back.
Chuck, Bob Stanfield dropped the football. Stanfield,
yeah, it's retribution.
Look at nobody.
It's nice to hear you complaining about press coverage. I think
I'd
that's
rather
great.
it was fair to Stanfield. I'd rather it was fair to everybody in politics. You shouldn't end up voting for people without knowing who they are and what they're about, and it shouldn't be false pictures with horns out of their head. For that matter,
where were you when they showed Stanfield dropping the football constantly?
I kept throwing a football. I kept throwing a football, and I haven't stopped throwing a football.
Where were you when Joe lost his underwear thanks to fathering him on the trip to India?
Where was Bill Davis and Peter Lougheed when Joe Clarke needed him in 1980? What have they got now from Brian Mulroney?
That's a non-sequitur. Darn right, it's a non-sequitur.
I'm trying to think of some of the other celebrated boo-boos. There was the underwear, there was the football. But of course, the media were always there when the 59-year-old Trudeau, slim, trim, muscled, and fit, bounced on the trampolines. You know?
Look, all parties are using images, and then more so, we're into this.
What happened to your image?
Well, we're using images too.
Honest,
Haven't you seen our ads and so on? I mean, that's part of the modern media.
I thought Honest Ed ran a used car market in Toronto or something.
You know what the best thing that happened in this campaign was your show yesterday with Turner. And it wasn't standing at some fake podium.
Don't you dare praise me for that show.
I'm praising you for the forum.
That was a pussycat program. He treated him with kid gloves. That's not the Jack Webster I know.
I asked him where he got the $1 million to pay off his shelter debts, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Maybe we should have some
And Turner showed up. Turner showed up. Where was your guy?
And why did Turner show up? Because he's running third in Quadra. That's why he turned up.
Mulroney's already taken the West for granted.
Quiet, please. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yes, I like to make... Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Is everybody listening?
We are all agog.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, I like to say one comment and one question to Mr. Cook.
Yes, please. Go ahead, ma'am. What happened to it?
Yes, I like to say that one thing is really troubling me about the election, that nobody asked questions about Brian Mulroney's background. He has a corporate image, but he's never been a full-time public servant. And the people never ask questions about that. I think when he comes into power, he'll be completely at the mercy of his advisors. He won't be his own man. Mr. Turner yesterday showed in-depth knowledge of the government, how things go about. He has specific knowledge of every aspect of government, which Brian Mulroney can't say he has. And that's why he wasn't on your talk show, in my opinion.
Thank you, ma'am. To be fair to Mr. Mulroney, he did do a job as a commissioner on the Clarke inquiry for Bourassa, the Liberal leader, which is where he first came to public prominence.
But it's not the same league as the experience of John Turner.
No, I wouldn't say an experience it isn't. Just a little bulletin.
Not even the same league.
Toronto.
And he spent a year in the House of Commons now.
Brian Mulroney said today in Toronto, where he says everything, that the cost of Conservative government programs for the next 2.5 years would be $4.3 billion. Tax relief and other discretionary spending would, for the remainder of the current fiscal year, would cost the Tory government between $300 million and $500 million. For the fiscal year 85-86, programs would cost $1.7 billion in tax incentives for business, job creation, and social programs. The next year, it would be $2.1 billion for conservative programs. It's not enough to talk about.
You know what, Jack?
Maybe stay tuned, because maybe we might start talking about the real issues in this campaign rather than pictures and not talking about Mulroney.
That's correct. The disastrous state of the economy caused by world trade and the Liberals.
Well,
Jack, let me say something on that thing. You have to watch carefully at the Conservatives' policies. On energy, they are giving, well, they are proposing to take away that petroleum gas revenue tax. That's a couple of $2.5 billion. These figures are not correct.
Wait till we get the full story. Typical, you're jumping in before you know the score. I just read your bulletin. Go ahead.
Wait a minute. The people supposedly are jumping in before they know the score on Mulroney.
Go ahead from Prince George.
Yes, my question's for Mr. Cook. Earlier on in the campaign, Mr. Mulroney had told us that he couldn't give us the full figures on his election promises because he wasn't inside the government books. And now he tells us that today, on August 28th, he can give them. One, I was wondering whose hat he's drawing these figures out of. And two, I was wondering whether I can believe him or whether I believe Mr. Oberle, our candidate up here, when he says it would be political suicide for us to give those figures. Thank you.
Well, what he's done, of course, is he's made some estimates on the thing, but we won't know the true state of government financing until we can get the books open and get the Auditor General in there. The Auditor General has to sue to get Crown Corporation figures.
You know, that's just balderdash. The Tories walk around saying we've spent 10 months putting together our policies, and we've announced part here and part. If you spent 10 months finally putting together some policies, why didn't someone stop during the 10 months and add up what they cost? Why do you have to wait till 3 days before an election to come out with it?
I love these guys. Before the election, they were saying we had no policy. Where are the Tory policies? Now we've announced all kinds of policies, and they're saying, why don't you cost them?
Go
are you guys
ahead.
never satisfied?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Is that me?
That's you.
Thank you. Mr. Cook.
Sir.
Do you agree with Brian Mulroney that we should give the Americans a blank check, benefit of the doubt on all of their foreign policy?
I believe the Americans are our best friends, should remain our best friends, and it's not going to help Canada or help us create jobs here if we spit in their eye. I don't accept your basic premise that we accept everything they do. Of course not.
Okay,
we must
gentlemen.
be independent.
Hold on.
Gentlemen, voting's on Tuesday, and you will win by how many votes?
How many votes? I think I'll win and do very well in Kingsway.
You will lose by how many votes?
I'm going to win by 1.
And you?
And John Turner's going to win handily in
by
Quadra.
1. You hope you win by 1. Gentlemen, you've been very forbearing and patient, and it's nice to be back in business again with 3 people like you.
It's been fun, Jack.
Nothing but jolly good fun.
Thanks,
and
Jack.
I want to say the best of luck to any of you. A plague on all your houses after the break. Tomorrow, Ed Broadbent, national leader of the NDP. It's Turner and now Broadbent tomorrow. Detailed interview, the NDP policies for the election. Webster at 9 a.m. precisely.